What is up, gamers? FCast and Chill here. So recently Jagex announced that they were going to be making some CoX changes, and they've actually just released a new poll today with a lot of different changes from what they originally proposed. And I want to go into it and talk about what I think about the changes in the poll questions. Before we do that, you're probably wondering who I am if you haven't seen my channel before, and why I know so much about CoX. So here is a screenshot of the Iron Man CoX challenge mode high scores, and you can see I'm right here on number 25. So I do have a lot of CoX experience. I've actually done all of these solo, and I'm very familiar with the raid. So let's go ahead and dive into it and show some of the things that they're talking about. So starting at the top here, the first change is they were talking about adding energy pools more frequently throughout the raid. So I think this is a really good change. Honestly, it's not a huge deal, but it is kind of nice to have extra energy throughout the raid and not have to sip your stamina doses, but you will still have to use staminas at Olm if you're doing solo Olms. So it does still have that challenge of making sure you bring staminas into the raid, but it won't eat up your doses, and it makes the inventory management just a little bit easier since you likely won't need as many stams throughout the floor. So I definitely think that's a good change. The next change here is speeding up the growth time for the prep while growing the plants, and I like this as well. I think that the prep time is one of the slower and more annoying things about the raid, and so, speeding it up is good. I do want to say, in general, my philosophy toward a lot of these changes is, if it diminishes part of the annoyance of raiding, like makes things a little faster or a little less RNG dependent, like the scavenger beast drops, I really like that. What I don't want to see is them making the raid significantly easier. I don't want Jagex to just make CoX easier and say, oh, some of the rooms are a pain in the ass, let's just make it easy. Like, that's not a good direction to go. But there have been times during my solo challenge mode raids where I'm hanging out killing the scavenger beast for like 5 minutes straight, trying to get the drops I need for prep. And that's not fun. There's no reason for it to be like that. So that gets onto one of the other changes that's actually down here, adjusting the scavengers to always drop 2 Sicily, 4 stinkhorn mushrooms, and 8 darkened juice. I love that change. I think that'll be enormously helpful, and it'll just make the raid a lot less frustrating. There's a couple other changes here on the poll questions asking about, non-iron seeing supply drops from the bosses and having other regular supplies appear when dropped. I don't really have an opinion about those since I play Iron Man almost exclusively, but I do think that it sounds nice for main accounts to be able to share the drops from different bosses. The next thing is some of the stackable objects within the raid. So, like having the malignant root planks that you get from the scavenger beast stackable. I don't see why not to do this. I think it'll be nice and make the inventory management a little better. No reason not to. Same thing with the stackable wood cutting that you get from Ice Demon and the stackable grubs in the thieving room. So on to the shortcuts here. They're talking about speeding up the mining and woodcutting shortcuts. Sure, I mean, it saves a few seconds, but it's not really a big deal, but might as well go for it. Now, one of the bigger changes is Tecton. So they've proposed a few changes to reduce the defensive capabilities of Tecton for both regular and CM raids, and I do like this change. So Tecton is a little bit frustrating sometimes, not because he's hard, just because his defense is so damn high. And I think that it would be a lot better if we could actually just have it to where maybe our Dragon Warhammer is guaranteed the first hit. You still have to have a Dragon Warhammer, but it would help out a bit. I also like the idea of buffing the Elder Maul here, because honestly, the Elder Maul is essentially useless as is right now. And I think it would be good for it to have some place in the game. As far as the actual number here with reducing the defense by 5% of its current value, I'm not sure about that. They'll definitely need to do some testing, but in theory, I like the idea. So I'm all for reducing Tecton's defense because that's one of the rooms that I think could use a little bit of work. Next is preventing the splashing on crabs, as well as removing the attack delay after hitting a crab. I have had some times in the crab room where I splash even though I'm setting it up perfectly, and then that just slows me down and causes me to lose 15 seconds or so. Again, not a huge deal, but I don't see why not. Like, I think that this is a good change. It'll just make the crabs room a little bit less frustrating on average. And then we already talked about the stackable kindling here. That's fine. Next is Ice Demon's magic defense. So I do think that fire spells should be a good way to deal with Ice Demon in theory. I mean, it's a demon made of ice. Being able to burn it to death sounds at least consistent with what you would expect. That said, I do not do magic Ice Demon. I always do melee Ice Demon with my Fang or an Arc Light. And I think that Fire Spell Ice Demon, it should be made better if it's a hassle, and it seems like it is in the CM realm, but I don't have strong feelings about this change one way or another. The next thing is adding some Herblore secondaries for some of the bosses. In general, I think this is a good idea. I don't see a reason not to do it. It just saves some time from killing the Scavenger Beast, but it doesn't really make the raid easier itself, so might as well go for it. We already talked about the thieving room grub stacking. I like it. Same with guaranteeing a minimum of 1 grub obtained on a successful chest opening in the thieving room. I like that as well because, you know, I have over 95 thieving on my Iron Man, and I've had times where I'm sitting there opening like 40 plus chests just to finish the thieving room because I'm getting bad luck on the grubs. And again, that just makes the raid artificially longer without making it any easier or harder. So like, might as well add these extra grubs in. Doesn't make the raid easier, just a little bit faster and less painful. Standardizing some of the drops within Vanguards, adding an overload drop to Vasa, fine. You know, again, it doesn't really impact the raid as a whole. And honestly, adding overload drops to more bosses, it does alleviate some of the concerns with scouting, because if more bosses drop overloads, then you don't have to scout for a raid that has to have an overload in it. So for regular CoX, I think it's actually a huge improvement, and it helps alleviate some of that scouting pain. Next is, this is the one that I think is a little bit more controversial. So adjusting Vasa's defensive capabilities. So I do think that Vasa is a little bit of a gear check right now with how its defense is, because if you're not able to kill it fast enough, then it just keeps healing at the crystals, then you can have issues. But I think that's okay. I mean, I actually have a video coming out soon where I did a budget CM kill count with less than 1 mil budget, and I was able to kill Vasa, so clearly you can do it with crappy gear. I don't think Vasa's really at a place where we need to lower the defense. I don't think that there's really any issues with Vasa. It's way different from Tecton, where that fight can just drag on for like 8 minutes if you miss your Dragon Warhammer specs. So I do not like the idea of making Vasa easier just for the sake of making it easier. So I'm voting no to this one here. But next we have the Muttadile room. So there's a couple changes here. One is reducing the variance of chopping the meat tree and how long it takes to be chopped. I'm for that change. I mean, sometimes it feels like the tree takes forever to chop, and other times it gets chopped instantly. And I don't see an issue with this. Might as well make it consistent based on your woodcutting level. And then there's another really small change here about removing the Muttadile's damage immunity when eating from the tree. Again, you shouldn't let it eat from the tree. You should chop the tree down before you get its health low enough. So it's not really an impactful change in my opinion. But this next one, however, reducing the damage taken by players at Muttadiles, this one is huge. And again, it might be a little bit controversial because this is one that would make the raid easier if it was implemented. But I want to say I am still for it. So the Muttadile room right now can be extremely frustrating. Like sometimes I'll go in there with 7 brews into a CM Muttadile, and that won't be enough. I'll have to, I won't even make mistakes. I'll just have to end up running away back to the chest to get more brews. And I think that's really annoying. It's like going in, you don't know if that Muttadile room is going to take 2 or 3 brews or if it's going to take 8. Like, there should be some more consistency where it doesn't just become a room where if you get bad RNG, you just have to chug through all your brews. So I think having some way for players to be able to reduce that damage. One thing they mention is making the attacks more predictable, like only letting them change style after a certain number of attacks. I like that because then it requires the player to do something to be able to block the damage instead of just like a flat out reduction. So I do think, I don't know exactly what the answer is here, but I think there should be some change to where the Muttadile room doesn't just shred through all your brew supplies if you're playing well. All right, keep going on. Vespula adding a guaranteed overload drop. Again, I'm for it. Makes scouting a bit easier and doesn't really impact the difficulty of the raid. Next is tweaking Vespula's mechanics without impacting the redemption method. I think pretty much everybody uses the redemption method, so this is like a non-issue to me. I think might as well go for the change. Like, maybe it would make it a little more viable to do without the redemption method, but it's really not going to impact things, so I don't really care either way. Then the last two are Olm. So Olm, we have adding the cooldown between the healing pool attacks, and this one I do think is a good change. You know, occasionally during head phase, you'll just get healing pool attack after healing pool, and it can be kind of a pain. I don't think it's really, I don't know, it's something that happens pretty rarely, but it's just kind of annoying. And I think it would make the raid a little bit nicer. It kind of does seem weird that he's able to just keep healing attack after attack if you're getting unlucky, and I don't think that that's really necessary. Again, doesn't make the raid much easier, but does tweak it slightly. Then this last change here is limiting the distance away from which the portal can spawn, and this only affects soloing from what they're saying. And I feel a little conflicted on this change. Like, I don't think it's necessary. I think that I could go either way on it. Like, it is technically making the raid a little bit easier if you make this change, but there are other times where, you know, maybe you'll be running back and forth and he'll do a flame wall and then cast the portal on the other side of it and you'll get teleported and take a lot of damage. But in theory, if you're playing perfectly, that shouldn't happen, right? So I don't think this change is necessary. I do think it makes Olm a little bit easier, but I don't have strong feelings about it either way. So that's really it for all the changes this time. Overall, I'm very happy with the direction Jagex is taking this. You know, like I said, they're making things more consistent, like the scavenger beast drops, the thieving room, you know, Muttadiles and Tecton, without making the raid easier, because I don't want them to just nerf CoX into the ground and make it a joke of a raid. So I'm a huge fan of all these changes. I do still want to throw that out there. I'm sounding like a broken record that they should change the CM drop rate with the scrolls versus the other purples. They should make the scrolls less common. But, you know, this is an amazing first step for CoX. I think it'll be interesting to see, you know, how things progress from here, but I'm very happy with the changes, and I want to thank Jagex for listening to the community and, you know, making some more interesting changes instead of just the scouting and scaling stuff to start. But anyway, that's all we got for today. I'm going to have some more CoX videos coming out soon. Got a nice budget kill count that I did that I want to show, and I'm getting closer to that 1250 kill count, which is when I'm going to have my next loot video. So feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you're interested, and I will catch you guys later. I hope everyone has a good time enjoying some CoX like I do.